have we are going to start off with the summer at glance, and then we have a keynote speaker today. And then we are going to go into our summer session, or the sessions for this meeting. So session 1 is the onboarding and first week expectations. Session 2 is leadership compass self-assessment. Session 3 is the ABCs to maximize your internship experience. Session 4 includes the NACE competencies. Session 5 is the effective professional communication, difficult conversations, and email etiquette. Session 6 is the goal settings, and then we're going to wrap it up with questions. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So for the summer at glance, many of you probably already started your internships. If not, you will be starting that soon. And you probably already have the dates for when you start your internships. Throughout the summer, we have professional development sessions. There's 4 of them. So there's going to be one on June 12th, June 26th, July 17th, July 31st, and these are all mandatory professional development sessions. We would love everyone to attend. Your supervisors should be aware of the summer sessions. If not, give them a quick reminder and let us know if you do have any questions or concerns. We have a summer internships showcase to kind of end it off with the summer presentations and celebrate you all for your internships, completing your internships, and that will be August 14th. You'll get more information about that soon, so you don't have to worry about that right now. And we would love for you guys to engage with your SSPs, have check-ins with your SSPs and myself if you have any questions throughout the summer.
Okay, so before we start, thanks, Thaseen. And by the way, students, SSP just really means your student support partner. So some of you have come to us through Minds Matter Boston, through Bottom Line, or through your college's career office. So if you have any issues or concerns about your internship, you can reach out to them. But Thaseen and Tiffany are also there as a resource, as am I. So just reach out to any of us. Like, really no concern or issue is too trivial. So anything that crosses your mind that you have a concern about, just reach out and ask. It's probably something that other students also are thinking and wondering about. So moving on to our keynote speaker, who is Dr. Minmin Yen. Mimi has been a supporter of Project Onramp through the years, has always stepped up to speak to students and to help us out. So thank you so much. She is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Phage Pro, which is a global health biotech startup developing solutions to antibiotic resistance. She graduated from MIT with a bachelor's in biological engineering. Then she pursued a microbiology PhD from Tufts, where she had the opportunity to work in Haiti for a month and also completed a master's in public health part-time, at the same time starting Phage Pro. So Superwoman. Mimi's here to share an honest account of her path so far, the lessons she's learned along the way as a young Taiwanese American woman in the life sciences, and just to answer any questions that you all may have. Welcome, Mimi, and thank you so much for helping us and being here today.
Of course. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be here to kick off your Project Onramp programming this year. So thank you to Lila, Tiffany, and Tassine for this invite. My name is Mimi. I'd like to open our session today with a bit about my journey in biotech and how I've navigated this world. But first, a little bit about Phage Pro. So Tiffany, do you mind, or Tassine, whoever is doing it, do you mind going to the next slide, please?
We don't have any of the slides except for your headshot.
Oh, okay. So give me 1 second. I have my slides. Do you mind if I share the screen?
Yes.
Sorry, y'all.
You can just make her a co-host.
I mean, you're now co-host.
Awesome. Thank you.
So the scene maybe stop sharing, Tiffany, stop sharing, and then Mimi can.
One second here. I think I'm going to lose your faces, unfortunately, but in any case, can you all see? If I could get a verbal affirmation, that would be great.
Yep, we can. Perfect.
Awesome. All right. So sorry about that technical glitch. All right. So let's start off with a little bit about Phage Pro. We are based in Boston and we are a global health preclinical, meaning we haven't gotten into humans yet, biotech startup. So we were founded in 2016 as a spinout from Tufts. So this is based off of my PhD work as a microbiology student in Dr. Andrew Camilli's lab. And we are women-owned, minority-owned as a public benefits corporation, which is a hybrid of a classic for-profit and a nonprofit. So we are for-profit with a mission statement as well. So one thing that we really think about at Phage Pro is the focus on communities that normally don't have a voice, either in biotech startup or even in large pharma companies. So we specialize in infectious diseases. Our lead program is targeting cholera, which is a diarrheal disease that's really been devastating communities around the world for quite some time and is an emergency right now, although it doesn't come up in the news very often. So something that we think about a lot as a US company operating in the aftermath of colonialism is navigating power dynamics, how we show up, and really understanding that is core to our operations. But we can't do that externally if we're not doing a lot of the work internally as well. So one of the first things that we really focus on is, what does diversity mean to us? How do we change what the face of biotech looks like? And that's all across the board, from entry level to advisory board, not just having it at the entry level. So we have people who are first gen, identify as LGBTQIA+, identify as BIPOC. We had, at our height, our ages spanned 5 generations. So I think that's one step. But the second step that we have really thought about is, how do you then, in all of that diversity, an inherent part of that and having all your voices heard and included in the decision-making process is having an open mind and coming to the table to sometimes participate in that difficult dialogue. And I think you all will see a lot of that happening in the companies that you all are interning with this summer. So that's Phage Pro now, but that's not where I thought I would be when I was a college student. So one of the first things that I really want to go to, which is definitely cliche, but I didn't really understand what it meant until I think I'm in my 3rd chapter now, but a career is a book with many chapters. I think when I was a college student, I went into MIT thinking that I had a very direct line of success. I was overconfident for sure, and thought that by the age of 30, I would have gotten my PhD. I would have done all these things to discover in the lab something that would help millions across the world. And it actually didn't really look like that. MIT was really hard. I was not a great biological engineer. I was not naturally born like I thought some of the people in my classes, where I felt really out of place. But also I had some trauma happen in my family. And it was really hard for us to process that together. And my mental health took a huge dive. And I became depressed. My GPA slipped. And I thought that right at the start of college, right at the start of my career, I already failed. And everything afterwards was going to be nothing close to what my dream was. But success really doesn't look like that. It took me a long time to really change my mindset and think about all these plot twists that life was throwing me, and what can I do to figure out a way forward? What can I do to really go and still lead the purposeful life that I was hoping to lead? And how do I come back from a lot of the work that that needed to be done on my part? And that gets to the second saying. I think a lot of us identify with feeling like the only in the room or the other in the room, or not feeling good enough. And sometimes when life throws us these curveballs, the power that we have is the resilience and the creativity. And that's something that's special that we bring. And that's something that can, what I think sets our hearts on fire. So this might sound like a bit of a naive setting, but whenever I think about all the different things that I've had to work through to get to where I am now and the future things that will be thrown my way, what is my guiding light in a way? So this phrase comes from Daniel Coke Balfour, or Oh Happy Danny on Instagram, and a heart on fire. And we don't have to really talk about it yet today, but I think it'd be a great reflection to start off your Project Onramp experience with. What does it mean to you at this stage in college? What are you driving towards? What is something that you can always come back to, that you can own, your voice, you could step into your power, and that's the thing that will keep you going throughout the hardships and the challenges that are going to come your way so you can overcome them and come out stronger on the other side. So to delve into a little bit about what that has meant for me, I talked about my MIT experience and feeling a bit like the other person and not feeling good enough. That also became more on a bigger scale when I stepped into biotech. And I do not look like the classic biotech founder. There's a lot of identities that I have that you can see when I step into the room that may change people's perception of me and whether or not I was a leader. So in biotech terms on funding, what that meant was that I do identify as a woman. Funding does not go to women founders generally, either women only or women and men co-founded US companies. We had a little bit of a blip, but then it came right back down. And if we talk about intersectionality, going back down to women of color, Black, Latina, and Asian American women got even less of that money. So one thing that I want to pause here is really differentiate between a lot of the external messaging and the internal messaging that we tell ourselves. So a lot of the places that we're stepping into, especially in biotech, are going to send this messaging that what we're doing is not good enough, or there's things that we need to keep pushing for, we have to keep grinding for. And that can affect the internal stories that we tell ourselves. And something that really affected me when I was going through this process of either a PhD student or now as a startup founder and CEO is a phrase that you all are probably all familiar with, the imposter syndrome. And that I don't actually really like this phrase. I think this puts the focus too much on the internal when there's a lot of external forces and systems at play that make us feel that way. But in any case, for me, I really felt like in a place where not many people were leading companies who looked like me, a lot of self-doubt. I was lucky to have this company. I'm lucky to be running it. Someone else would do a much better job at running this company than I could have. I think there was a lot of that external messaging that was coming in that I was internalizing and telling it to myself. And we could talk about all the systemic things that are happening that contribute to that. But internally, sometimes what we need in the moment is figuring out what kind of thoughts we are telling to ourselves and how do we neutralize that and how do we come back from that and lean back on that resilience that we all have to kind of process and figure out our next step forward. So one part for me that really helped, and I think Project Onramp is really good about, is finding community. So for me, that meant going to other women of color in particular at Tufts Graduate School. This is Charmaine and Kathy. And we started Scientists in Solidarity in 2020. And we say it's a BIPOC life sciences community that shows up for each other. So we all experience different things as we were pursuing our ambitions at Tufts University. And we really wanted to be there for each other and have that scale. So we have a community to fall back on when that internally messaging and storytelling becomes a little too much. And we can be relentless cheerleaders for each other. So we started doing events, we put together resources. Feel free to visit the SIS website for this, but we have things on resilience, stress management, but we also have curated very specific mental health resources as well for different communities. And all of that is to say that when life is giving you all these plot twists, when there's going to be these inevitable failures, these feelings, how do you then pick yourself back up? And one, finding community, but for me, coming back to that phrase, the heart on fire, work-wise, it meant looking for problems that don't get a lot of attention, which is why I chose infectious diseases and low and middle income countries. It meant being an everyday advocate. It meant that sometimes the big things feel really too overwhelming, but what are some small actions I can do to advocate for those communities, to advocate for communities who look like me, in Boston, for other communities that felt marginalized in the biotech world. But it also meant leading with it, not only an open mind, but an open heart. And something that I found over the past decade or so is that as we experienced a lot of things, as we grow up, there is a tendency to close out the heart a little bit and get a little cynical. But for me and my work and the work that you want to be doing with all of your peers, having that open heart, maintaining that intentional choice is really important, for this positive self-talk, for this community uplift. And that gets down to choosing hope. So I think a lot of people say that having hope sometimes is a little bit naive, but hope as a discipline, intentionally choosing it, intentionally choosing to neutralize some self-talk, intentionally choosing to stay positive, coming back to that relentless and ruthless cheerleader for ourselves and for our peers. I think that's what it all comes down to when we're trying to navigate this career at the very beginning, when everything seems overwhelming, and a big failure at the beginning or any inevitable failures that come up can feel almost life altering. But there's a lot of hope. You all are going to do amazing things. If you find your community, really cheer each other on, I think you all will be unstoppable. And I'm really excited to hear from you all in the upcoming summer. So please feel free to email me on LinkedIn. You can message me at my email as well. I'm available to meet with you all this summer. So good luck at the start of your journeys here, and I can't wait to hear about it. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Mimi, for sharing your wisdom and an inspiring journey with us today. We appreciate you for taking the time to share your experiences and being vulnerable and providing advice into how you got into the life science industry. And I'm sure the interns as well as myself has learned a lot from you. We will now transition into our first session, which will focus on your first week, onboarding, and what that first week expectations might look like. And you will hear from our partner, Alma Ortiz from Cura Oncology, who will share about a typical onboarding process as well as some norms and challenges you could expect working in a corporate setting, especially since many of you is going to be working at a first corporate job. So we really hope this session will ease some of your stress and anxiety as you start a new role or have already started a new role. One second, we don't see Alma on the Zoom just yet.
Sorry, everyone. Just sent a just called Alma. She's on the West Coast. She was running a little late and she's hopping on any minute. I just wanna, I don't know if Mimi's still on, but oh yes, there you are. Thank you so much, Mimi. I feel like it really helps to hear about a journey like that, because I think when students look at quote unquote successful professionals, they really do see that straight line. And it's kind of a mystery. Like, how did Mimi become a CEO of a company? Like, that just seems like such an unattainable mountain to climb. And And it's just nice to hear that you yourself kind of went through these little detours and doubts and, needed support, as we all do. So I don't want to put any students on the spot, but did any of you, did you relate to what Mimi said? Did anyone, was anyone surprised? Does anyone want to speak up while we wait for the next speaker?
I think I definitely resonated with what Mimi said, and especially her journey first coming into college. I came in with huge expectations, and at first it wasn't working according to what I expected, but as you continue to progress and you persevere, you realize that there's different opportunities in line, or some things probably fell through for other reasons that you might not know yet, but there's still hope.
Mhm. Yeah. Nomar, I see you nodding. Do you have anything to add?
I just think that is really cool that now in the society that there's still women that really want to be empowered. So I really like that about Mimi.
Well, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but it's good to see you, Justin, on the Zoom. I hope you're settled in Boston. Could you relate to some of the things that Mimi was pointing out as you start to think about building your career? Justin Mustuka?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
For me, I would say it was I thought opportunities, I guess, would be easier to come by, and I thought it would be more of a straight line. But those were a bit more difficult, and I think my journey was already a little curved in that regard. And so, yeah, just not having the straight line as I expected going into college.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Ali, I see your hand up.
For me, I went after high school, I attempted trade school. That didn't work, and then I enrolled in college. I went to Bunker Hill for a year, and then I transitioned over to Northeastern University.
Mm-hmm,
My whole idea was like, I'm gonna go to college and I'm gonna start making money, whatever. But it was
mm-hmm,
very, very different.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, but you persevered, which is amazing. Anyone else? I see a lot of students with your cameras off, but would love to hear from some of you. Alicia, Mart, I know you've been an intern for multiple years. Do you have any insights?
I had a pretty similar experience as well with Mimi. I'm as a woman of color, it's important to see representation and just be able to see that I'm able to have a pathway in this career as well. And also understanding not having a straight pathway as well. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do as a career, and I've explored in many different areas. And I think that's really helped me in understanding what I want to do and what I really enjoy and what I think will really give me a purpose.
I see Helen's hand up.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, relating to both the imposter syndrome and the unstraightforward career path, I was I missed out on an opportunity to do first year research at my school because for some reason the invitation was in my promotions folder and I didn't check it, and I was upset this whole entire year that if I just opened that folder a few days earlier, I would have gotten accepted into a research program. But it did work out in the end because I have this internship here, which I am currently loving. So um it sometimes doesn't work out the way you're supposed to, but if you keep trying, there will be other opportunities. Yeah.
Oh, I think you muted, Lila.
That's so great to hear, Helen, and we're so happy to have you as part of Project Onramp. And I think Tiffany and Tassine, Alma, our next speaker, is here, so we can probably share the screen and keep going with the presentation. Thanks, everyone, for sharing.
Well, welcome all. Thank you all for your time. This is really exciting to be able to present to you all, and I hope you're all looking forward to your internship here starting soon. And then Tiffany, if you could go to the next slide. Okay. So our agenda for today is kind of going over what is onboarding, preparing for your first day, just remembering that first impressions matter, kind of a day one overview, a general overview of what your first day will look like, setting the foundation for understanding your role and performance expectations and setting expectations, and then the importance of building relationships. So before we get started, let's get a pulse on your previous experience with onboarding. Is this your first job? And there should be.
Alma, I don't hear you so well. I don't know if
Okay.
anyone else is having that
Let
same
me try to
issue.
get a little bit closer. Tiffany, it's the
Oh, that's much better.
okay, good. There should be a QR code that they can scan to take the survey. Did that populate?
That did not come up.
I did not see it on your slides, Alma. We could
Um,
just have students speak up.
okay. Yeah, that works.
I just
So can we kind of hear from a few people on, is this your first job? How much experience do you have with onboarding previously? Maybe a raise of hands just in the chat or with the features.
And really by onboarding, what we mean is, just in your first week, do you know either if you're already working, how did they kind of get you used to how this company works, what to expect? And if you haven't started, do you have like an idea of how that's going to go? And Helen, I think you raised your hand.
Couldn't find a reaction thing. I'm sorry. I've already started my internship, so I have been through onboarding, but I have also been to one internship like in the past, and I would say like it was at a lab. Being in the industry is so different from like working in academia. The process is entirely different. Their lab training is also very different. So it's a lot of meetings. But yeah, it went smoothly. Everything went great.
Yeah, and onboarding really lays the foundation for kind of what to expect throughout your internship. So we can go ahead and go back to the slide, Tiffany. I'm sorry the Slido didn't work. It may be because it's on my account and you're sharing, but apologies for that. And then we can just go ahead and skip ahead. So as stated, onboarding is the process of assimilating you into the organization and providing knowledge and tools for you to achieve early and have early success in your new role. And kind of the key objectives of onboarding are, introductions, introducing you to the company, getting familiar with the values, the mission, and kind of what the organization is about, and also introducing you to your team and meeting key players on your team. And then laying expectations out. So expectations from your manager on what your role is going to be within the organization, and also for you to set expectations on what you hope to gain from the internship. And then ultimately integration. One of the key things about being successful in any organization is integrating well into that company, into the culture, both within your team and within the company broadly. And next slide. So preparing for your first day, some just kind of tips to plan ahead. One thing that's really important is your commute. So I know Boston traffic can be crazy. So I do recommend just kind of planning out your first day, know where you're going, how long it's going to take, the parking situation, if you're taking public transportation, kind of map out your path. And then, before your first day, you probably have a start time or a start date and arrival time. Just make sure you have all those details. And as a rule of thumb, I just recommend for your first day planning to get there 15 minutes beforehand, just to plan for any unexpected delays and, navigating where you need to go. I know some buildings have security check-ins, so just make sure you have all those details. And then dress code. So this can be a tricky one, and there's different kind of practices throughout different organizations. For example, we have 2 offices. So we have one in San Diego and one in Boston. And in San Diego, we can wear jeans. It's a little bit more laid back. But in Boston, we had to, send out an email saying it's okay to wear jeans. It doesn't have to just be on, kind of this casual Friday, but it's okay. So just kind of get a pulse for what that is at the company you're going to. And then just as a suggestion, being a little overdressed your first day is probably better than being underdressed. But it can be uncomfortable if you, show up in a suit or something when that's not the company culture. And then of course, if you're working in a lab, just make sure that you're wearing appropriate attire for safety. Next slide, please. And preparing for your first day, as mentioned, arrive early, come dressed to impress, come prepared. So do your research if you haven't already done so on the organization, prepare a couple questions. Prepare a couple questions that you'd like to ask your manager or even during your introduction meetings. And then obviously introduce yourself with confidence. If there's someone you're passing in the hallway or, someone that's sitting in your area, feel free to introduce yourself and explain, your role there. And then during this first week, you're going to have a ton of information thrown at you. So be an active listener, take notes, ask questions, and, just plan to be cognizant of that during this first week and first few days. And then I had another kind of slide of questions, so I'll open it up for discussion if you want to go to the next slide, Tiffany. So what are some other tips you can think of to make a good first impression? If anyone would like to share. Yes, you have any chat too if you'd like. It said be enthusiastic, smile, ready, and then to ask questions. And we have a question. So what would casual business attire look like? So I would suggest like a nice top, maybe a button-up shirt, and then, reasonable pants. So maybe some, not slacks, but just nicer, no holes in them types of pants. And I think that would be a really good start. That's at least what we kind of said in both offices, and you can't go wrong with that. Another recommendation was, Michelle mentioned that oftentimes dress code is included in the handbook, and definitely reference your handbook. Nick recommended smile and introduce yourself to everyone. Great suggestions. Thank you all for the comments. And then your first day. So the wait is over. You're ready. You came early. You're dressed to impress. So some expectations for your first day, familiarize yourself with your office, with your new space, know where the restrooms are, the break room, the entrances and exits. If you don't have a scheduled office tour, check in with your manager and have them walk you through. And then your equipment and technology, make sure that you have all of the equipment you need to be successful to start. You'll probably set up time with IT and make sure everything's working and operating well. Also review with your manager if you have all the permissions and access that you need. And then, within the first week, you'll you'll likely have an orientation and company overview. And that'll just be an introduction to the company's mission, values, culture, and practices. And then you'll need to finalize any new hire paperwork. So if you're hired directly through the company, you'll complete I-9, all of your personnel information for your employee file, and just make sure that you have every documentation and anything that you need to bring to complete those forms. And then intro meetings. So intro meetings are really important that first week. You're getting to know your team. You'll be able to ask them kind of what their role is and how you're going to interact with each other moving forward. And I just really encourage you to use this time to get to know them and kind of talk through their career path to where they are today. And then the first day meeting with your manager, you really want to connect on expectations, your schedule, their preferred form of communication. So if they like emails, IMs, even text and cell phone, and maybe ask for examples of when it's appropriate to use different modes of communication. And then just to reiterate, there's going to be a lot of information coming your way. Take notes, ask questions, and plan for a time to review materials later. And then next slide. So understanding your role and setting expectations, the first week or so, you really just are trying to get your bearings, trying to understand how to navigate your responsibilities and also get used to kind of the lay of the land. So use this first week to really solidify what you're expected out of your internship with your manager, and set individual goals. You have a few months in this internship, set realistic and attainable goals and talk through those things with your manager. And then learning resources. Ensure you have materials needed to be successful in your role. So reviewing any SOPs, manuals, online courses, and then also ask for any additional training materials that you may be able to review during, downtime when your manager is a little busy and doesn't have time to train. What can you do to gain additional skills and review materials available within the organization or outside? And then, so building relationships. As I mentioned, teamwork and connection is key. So at my company, we have a program called the Career Culture Partner, and this person is just another resource to a new hire during onboarding. They act as, someone that can answer questions and help integrate the new hire into the company culture. So if your organization doesn't already have a program set up like that, ask your manager who would be a good person to kind of be an extra support during this process that you can go to and can kind of introduce you to people and make connections that way as well. And then
Alma, I just wanted to have ask a question that might be relevant to interns. If you do want to get a buddy and start networking, when do you suggest a student starts to do that? Like after how many days, weeks? Like when do you sort of start asking for stuff like this?
Yeah, so I recommend kind of early on. I think the first few days you're just kind of getting through all of your training material, but I think by the second week, especially with your internships, being a couple months, I think making connections early is important. So within the first week or two, talk to your manager about who you can connect with in the organization and maybe plan to schedule those meetings over, the first 3-ish weeks. But I think early on is important just so that you have that connection and are able to integrate quickly into the organization. And then I think the introduction of colleagues outside of your team can kind of be throughout your internship. It doesn't need to be right away, but this is a good opportunity to explore different career paths that you may not have considered before. But definitely talk to your manager about who those people may be that would be good to connect with.
Are we on to the next slide?
Oh, yes, next slide. Yeah. And then just in conclusion, remember that the first week will be kind of information overload. Take notes, ask questions, and then review material later. And then, really be intentional. I know it's going to be a lot, but about getting the most out of the first week and obviously your internship overall. I had one more slide, but we can kind of talk that through. I would love to hear from you about what you're looking most forward to during your internship and even what you hope to gain through it.
Yeah, interns. Anyone want to speak up and kind of talk about what you're hoping to gain? Like for some of you, you may be graduating in a year. For others, you may be kind of thinking about like, is this the right major for me? So I'd really like to hear sort of what you're looking forward to and what you kind of want to do this summer, what you want to get out of this summer. I see some students without your cameras on, but I hope you'll speak up, like Aviance, Samuel Espinoza, Sarah. Can some of you unmute and turn on your cameras and kind of let us know what you're thinking? We'd love to hear from you.
It's like Ali has his hand raised.
Can I answer this?
Yep.
I was gonna say maybe like building more and like refining my transferable skills, like communication, like just so you can use those skills wherever you go. And second thing, maybe like getting like a part-time offer from them, like after the internship ends for the fall, for example, if that's possible. But
And
yes,
it has been many students from Project Onramp. I have to say more on the business side, communications, that type of thing. They have stayed on at the company during the school year.
Even at our company, we had an intern that started in the summer and he actually stayed on through his senior year. So we were hopeful to kind of transition him into a full-time role, but it didn't quite work out that way. But at least he got a year's worth of experience and it kind of helped him in transitioning to his new role.
Personally, for me, what I want to get from my internship is I've been kind of like obsessed with accounting for a while, but I'm not really sure like what accounting is or what, exactly what to do with it. So like just being in there, I want to see if I actually like the job or if I actually, want to pursue that as a career.
Yeah. And that's the perfect place to do that, right? It's one thing to study it, but get real life exposure to it is something completely else. And it will give you an understanding and kind of point of view to see if that's something that you actually really enjoy doing.
I see Deborah's hand up, Deborah Bertain.
Hi, yeah, so I'm a law major and I've never been in the biotech field industry before, so I'm wanting to like diversify my portfolio and see how legal skills can transfer into biotech fields because immigration for a little bit. So I really wanted to like just experience as much as I can because I know that's what internships are for. And I'm about to graduate, so I want to make sure that I am as well-rounded as I can be before going off to law school.
Yeah.
That's really a perfect reason. Anyone else? I want to hear, I don't know if Arinze is on the Zoom. Arinze, I know that this is your second year at the same company. Do you want to kind of speak up about how you ended up here?
Oh, it's actually my first year working
Oh,
with Mitchell. Yeah.
But you have a mentor at this company, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her name is Lizzie and Christian. They're both my mentors. But yeah, basically like I've just been kind of like struggling on figure out what I want to do like after graduation. But I know I want to do like something in the drug industry. So this internship has like really helped me like put the pieces together, and like this is something I really want to do, and seeing like the whole drug discovery process and how everyone on their like little own thing, but also collaborating with each other is something that I see myself doing in the future. So this is like a great way to just see what I want to do.
Yeah, that's great. And any last sort of words? Maggie, do you have anything to add? Maggie Stewart Smith?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry. Me and another Onramp student are at the same company actually, so we're like in the same room.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with everything everyone's been saying. I'm mostly just excited to like get a better picture of like what a job like this actually looks like, because I feel like I didn't really have an idea about that before. So it's cool to like just be in a company setting and like getting to know like what a possible career in this would look like. And yeah, just like improving communication skills and like problem solving. So yeah.
Yeah, all the things that you kind of hear about, but maybe are not always practicing like in a classroom setting, right? That's great. So thank you so much, Alma.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here, and best of luck to you all in your internship.
Thank you, Alma. 1 second. Our next session will be the Leadership Compass Self-Assessment, led by Michelle Schneller from the Halloran Consulting Group. We had sent an assessment PDF form out to you all to review ahead of time. And this assessment is to really help you reflect on your leadership strengths and weaknesses, whether that be in the classroom, at work, or in your personal life. And this session is really to help you understand how your leadership qualities can have an impact in the classroom, in your internship, as well as in your future career. So Michelle, whenever you're ready, please feel
Awesome.
take it away.
Yes. Thank you, Tiffany. And Alma, thank you for that onboarding presentation too. And obviously I'm head of people, so I live in that world. And I think something you said that's incredibly important, I just wanted to reiterate it for a moment, are those expectation setting, right? Knowing how you show up and what you bring to the table. And you'll hear me say that again, but I think it's, you know, if you think about kind of our hierarchy of needs, those resources and access to information and people and tools, that's all part of kind of that expectation setting. And so if I had to say a key takeaway from Alma, your presentation, I would say it's that. But anyway, I digress. Thank you for having me. Welcome interns. I just a little bit about Halloran. So we are a consulting firm in life sciences consulting, and we provide strategic, regulatory, quality, clinical, and organizational support to our industry leaders, to our startup visionaries, you know, like you heard from Mimi today, in the pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and medical device sectors. And in addition, I am joined by a few of my colleagues who you'll hear from later this afternoon. But today I'm going to lead you in a brief session about leadership and strengths. And so we all have talents, right? We have these instinctual ways of behaving. And we are all different, and we contribute in different ways. And that should be welcome. That's the diversity of all of our talents, right? Our experiences, you know, that shaped us, all contribute to kind of those instinctual ways of behaving. Our talents, they describe us, they direct our actions, they influence our choices. They explain why we're better at some things than others, and it's why we prefer some things to others. So drawing on your talents, your preferences, your ways of working will be critical as you kind of take that next step in your career journey. I'd like to say in your life journey. And so that's why we're here today. You heard Tiffany share, you should have all received the Leadership Compass self-assessment, where we asked you to kind of read the statements, place a check mark in the boxes next to the statements that you feel apply to how you make choices and decisions. And it's really important to understand that depending on the situations you face at home, at school, on a project team, in your internship, those may all be unique. But what we're after here today is having you consider the statements that represent you most of the time. I know when I took the assessment, I looked down and I said, my goodness, I think I'm just checking off every box in every direction here. So I had to go back and think more critically and really reflect on what really describes me most of the time. Once you tallied the number of statements in each section, you look to the highest number in each of those stars to uncover some insights, to uncover what may be your dominant decision-making style. And I'm going to pause here and just ask for folks to use the chat feature or quickly come off mute and share what did you end up with? What was your dominant style? Was it north, south, east, or west? Just type it in. Give me a sense of what we're working with. Okay, I see 2 west, 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 east. Okay, north, east, fantastic. I see a lot of west, a couple souths now. Awesome. It was a tie. Yeah, same. I had a tie between north and east, south and west. So I don't know what that says about me. Fantastic. And, curious, is this one of the first times, and you put this in the chat too, that you've done something like this little bit of self-reflection? Yes. Yes, no's, mixed. Okay. So, in the workplace, you're going to be faced with situations where you must effectively communicate, and we heard that is a hope that y'all will kind of get out to this session today. We're going to hear a little bit more about that. Great skill to have, active listening, but you're gonna need to effectively communicate. You're gonna need to partner across various groups with various stakeholders. And we know that successful partnerships really draw out the best in both people. So by taking this assessment, you have some insights into your how you work. You have some language that you can use to describe that, right? You can take that, you can own that, you can share it with others. It really helps you to describe who you are, what you may need, and again, what you can offer, what your value to the group is, or to the project team, or what you may bring to the proverbial table, if you will. The most effective way to develop really and to empower you to succeed in your role and in your internship is to use those strengths. Really uncover what it is, how it shows up, times when you think you were successful in doing XYZ, and then applying that intentionally. You must be open and willing to actively listen, to seek for understanding. And I think along with expectation setting, seeking to understand, meaning asking some curious questions, thinking about how you show up and maybe how others are showing up, is also incredibly important. Oftentimes, and you may have heard it in your interviews, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? It's a very common interview approach. I would say I don't like it. I'm just going to be honest. Wouldn't it be better if we were to focus instead on stories or times when you used what you naturally do well, those strengths, and how you applied your strengths to a challenge? I would like to say that if we are talking about strengths and weaknesses, that it would likely make more sense and you will probably feel more motivated, engaged, happy, your well-being more intact if you were to hone and maximize what you do naturally well, and then find partnerships or find opportunities to tweak kind of the situations you're in or that you're maybe faced with, if it's not allowing you to draw from an area of strength, if it's forcing you to maybe draw from areas of lesser talent. And I would suggest that it's not a weakness per se, unless it's truly getting in the way of your success. And then if that's the case, we can look to kind of our work styles, our approaches, how we show up and what we may need. And we can tailor that, and we can have great conversations with a manager, with an onboarding buddy, with members across your project teams or other interns, if you will. So let's really explore your dominant style. So on the next slide, I do have some discussion prompts. And I'd love to hear from the group. This is your time. I could speak the entire time, but you don't want me to do that. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear some folks, and you can type it in the chat as well and get all forms of communication going. What was kind of your initial reaction to your assessment? We saw, folks took it. We had some ties, but what was your initial reaction? How did it make you feel? What did you think after taking the assessment? And Lila, I know you're good at calling on people, so I'm gonna call on some folks.
I don't want to put people on the spot, but if anyone, I mean, I'm kind of really interested to hear. Some of you got 2, Northeast or Northwest. Can one of you who got both speak up and kind of talk about whether you felt like it reflected you and your vision of yourself?
Yes, and then I think Shannon had her hand raised as well.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, Shannon.
Shannon and then Aviance.
Hi. So I got the vision aspect of it, and I just thought it was really interesting because I knew I was kind of like a creative person, and I knew some of the things to answer the questions that I was answering, I kind of knew that I was that sort of thinker and worker, but it was interesting to me to see how conceptually I think and how I work with other people in that like bigger scale, I guess. So I thought that was really eye-opening, and it was cool to see that like broken down for me.
Awesome. And Shannon, can I ask you a question since you were brave and spoke up?
Yeah.
Now, if you are coming from a place, so East, that's visionary, right?
Yep.
How do you think that you need to show up, or how do you build relationships with folks who may be coming from North, right? Where they're action oriented, they're assertive, they're very decisive, they're quick to act, where visionaries, right, need to see the bigger picture. So you might need a little extra time, right? And I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall, I'm making this up, not diagnosing anyone, but tell me about that. How do you approach building a relationship knowing you are coming from the East, if you will?
So, I mean, I feel like people always kind of need to encounter this in like, whether it be like in the classroom, if you're doing a group project or something like that. So I know I've definitely worked with people where they're kind of like, they definitely know what they want to do. They're very assertive about it. So what I usually do is throw out my main idea, like what I think the goal should be, I guess, and what the bigger picture is. And then those kinds of people I think are better at breaking down what specific steps we need to do in order to reach that goal. So I think finding like a compromise between I can do this and you guys can do this, and just like working together for it.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. I love that. That's really a true partnership. So you're leveraging what you do really well and what that other person does really well. And together you can achieve that kind of common goal. I think, Aviance, you also had your hand raised as well. So I'd love to give the floor to you. And then I just saw another hand, but just jump in.
Hi everyone, my name is Aviance, and I got a tie between North and West, which is action and analytical. And it wasn't very surprising to me. I think in my leadership style and like working with teams, this is something that I've noticed about myself. So it was more reassuring to know that something like this assessment also sees that. Yeah.
It's nice it's validating, right? To say, okay, I thought that about myself. now I have some words to describe that. I think what we also must be aware of as we explore and we kind of jump into our career journeys, our life journeys, is how, where there might be some friction, where styles and approaches may not jive, if you will, and how do you kind of approach that challenge? How do you continue to build that relationship with that individual that, professionally, personally, it doesn't matter. I think it transcends all life areas. So that self-awareness is really key. And I apologize for mispronouncing your name.
I love Brooke's comment in the chat. She said, I wasn't too surprised by my result. I already knew I was very analytical, but it was cool to see the limitations listed out since I related to a lot of them.
Meaning those styles taken to excess. Is that what, Brooke, you meant by the limitations?
Hi, sorry, my colleagues stepped up. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
I was curious to understand, you were referring to, when you say limitations, were you talking about the styles taken to excess?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the ones about like kind of like getting stuck or like having trouble seeing people's perspectives who are looking at it from like a different perspective, because I'm very like data driven. I try to look at things in like what I perceive as the most practical sense. So trying to see that like there are other perspectives besides that is, I can definitely get stuck in that.
Absolutely. And I think, again, you bring up a really nice point about self-awareness, right? So, there's blind spots to all of the things that make us really good at what we do and how we approach problem solving, et cetera, et cetera. And I always use my sister as this example because she is also very analytical. And sometimes, and I draw from more relationship building themes, if you will. And at some point, I say to my sister, Caitlin, like, I don't care how far away the restaurant is or how many things are on the menu or the price points of this. Like, I'm hungry. Let's just go eat. Like, she was kind of stuck in that analysis paralysis. And I don't mean, to be humorous or belittle anyone who draws from analytical. We need that. We need all of you and your strengths. It's about how you are intentionally applying them to the situations you encounter. And I think, Helen, you said something in the chat as well, and I'd be remiss if I didn't address that. And I think you're right. I think the situations we encounter are all unique. So you are not just limited by what this document says or the words on this page. You and your approaches and your styles and your strengths are very dynamic. So you kind of draw on a variety of things across all of those situations. And it's certainly not meant to limit, but maybe to give you some insight into how to describe how you show up, or maybe what you need from others so that you can feel engaged and motivated in kind of your work and your personal life. So thank you, Helen, for calling that out. I think someone said it didn't surprise me too much. That was my second question there. And Brooke, again, thank you for sharing that. But can we hear from others? I'm gonna jump down.
I see Richmie has her hand up.
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. I can only see like 6 people on my screen. Go ahead.
Well, my name's Richmie. Yes, I got a tie between vision and empathy. What surprised me was more like how the descriptions kind of called out on a lot of things that I don't usually think about. Reading the descriptions, I thought it really related to me as a person, but they're not things that I ever thought about. So it was really interesting to like see and kind of like be more self-aware of how I am as a person and how I approach work. So it was really surprising in that way. But the descriptions weren't surprising because reading it, I realized that I knew those things about myself. I just never thought about them before.
Yeah. And I would suggest it's because you do them instinctually, right? Like your behaviors and your ways of working, sometimes we don't pause and say, well, I'm coming from my north action-oriented self right now. Or similarly, I am coming from my southern direction and leading from empathy. We don't often stop long enough, right, to think about those. And that's why sometimes it's really hard to self-reflect, and you need to give yourself space. And so as you're thinking about your internship and what you feel you need to be successful, you do have to give yourself some grace and some time to really think through what motivates me, what drives me, what's my North Star, you know, what do I want to be known for? And it's not, you know, gonna be an easy answer. You're certainly not going to be able to describe that you know, in a minute or two. But continuously going back to that and thinking about that as you experience you know, the ups and downs, and you know, as Mimi shared, that line of success as you go through your trials and tribulations of career and growth and development, thinking about that often. Let's see, there's a new message. Yeah. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about limitations. We started to talk about that. Thank you, Brooke. But what about limitations of your dominant styles? Folks tend to like to talk about what they feel like they don't have or weaknesses. So I like to try to reframe that in a more positive way. So what are the limitations of your most dominant style?
Love to hear from some students who haven't spoken up. Jake, do you have an opinion? Jake Reed?
What was the question? Sorry.
That's okay, Jake. So the question was just getting you to think about limitations of your most dominant style. So what kind of share with us, what's your dominant style and what do you feel are kind of those limitations or things that might get in your way?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I'm North, which is very, it's very active, very proactive, like you take initiative on things. And one of the limiting things on North is like if it's especially too strong, like you can sometimes come off too strong or come off, oh, this person seems really cocky or they seem really confident in themselves, So like I think you have to be careful with your skills because if you're like if you come off too strong sometimes, or if you come off, too analytical and say, well, the data says this, like, I'm not going to change my mind. Or like if you're too empathetic and, you can't do something because like it might, hurt someone's feeling. I mean, you would never want to hurt someone's feelings. But I think my point is made to the fact that like you never want to, put someone in a place where because of your actions, like you make other people feel uncomfortable or interfere with your work because, you're coming off too strong in these certain strengths. So I think it's really knowing, like putting a foot on the brake and saying, okay, like I need to slow down and evaluate, think, am I doing too much? If that makes sense. So it's kind of a ramble, but I think
No, it does 100%, Jake. And I'd be willing to bet you can recount times when that's gotten in your way, right? And maybe, hindsight is 2020 if you could only have done it differently or approached it differently. But you have that awareness, right? And that's key. It's that self-awareness piece. And I'd be willing to bet many folks on the call who maybe lead from that action style probably have really high expectations of themselves. And when others are maybe not meeting those expectations, we become impatient, we become frustrated, right? So knowing that about yourself, like you can use your words to effectively communicate or just really share with folks kind of how you show up. We're coming to about time for my section, but I'd love to end with any final thoughts from the group, maybe something you may take away from this brief exercise or something that really has resonated with you and you'll carry forward into your internship. Any final thoughts on that last question? And Lila, you might have to help me if other hands are raised and I don't see them on my screen.
I mean, I would think really for all of you students, like I have to admit, like when I was younger and I was doing internships and even early in my career, I did know, like Richmie said, I did know certain things about myself, but they weren't in the front of my mind as I showed up as a professional. And so what we're hoping is that you will kind of, as situations crop up that are wonderful or challenging during the summer, that you will kind of start to think about like, oh, I'm reacting this way because this is how I approach the situation. My colleague is reacting this other way because they're probably seeing it in this other way. And we really hope that it'll just help you to navigate all these situations. Does anyone kind of have some final thoughts, or we can move on to the next session?
That's true. Yes. Thank you,
Yeah.
Lydia. I agree. And, as we just shared, kind of, taking that time to explore how you show up, what your work style is, your dominant style, drawing those connections to how those behaviors support the decisions you make or influence actions you take, because you really want to be in a position to pinpoint what you do best, your unique contributions, and how you can shape the culture of your workplace or your community, if you will, and really learn how you can use your strengths to accomplish your goals and your priorities. And that'll give you the potential for success in your internship and in that next phase of your career journey. So thank you so much for spending some time reflecting. I hope you'll be able to leverage the insights you've learned in the session, and looking forward to hearing more from the presenters from today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That session was very engaging on the leadership assessment and how it gives interns a real understanding of their strengths and how they can best use their strengths to help others and work with others to achieve some sort of project or a common goal. Our next session is facilitated by Anushka Arlanetto from Elysian HR Consulting, and she'll share some best practices and give some advice on how to be successful in your internship and beyond. And excelling in your internship is important because it can really open doors to future opportunities to either return next year, being offered a role after graduation, or having strong professional references when you are ready to apply for full-time jobs in the real world. So when you're ready, Anushka, your slide. I'm just pulling. Okay. Oop. Perfect.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Tiffany, and thanks everyone. It's lovely to meet you all. I will say that I am super excited for each and every one of you. It's taking me back to, gosh, over 20 years ago when I was an intern. I was an intern during my senior year in college. And I ended up, I wish there was a program like Project Onramp back in the day that could have helped me. I ended up graduating from college in 2001. Some of you may not know or remember this, but it was a very, very difficult time in the economy and to find a job, especially for students like me who were international students who needed visas to stay in the country. I ended up somehow getting an internship in my senior year, and thankfully was then able to graduate and then stay with that company as a full-time employee. I ended up staying with them for 12 years. So this experience is just so exciting and meaningful. So I'm really hoping that you all have a great experience as well. So what I'm going to talk about today is, so we've heard about your onboarding, your first week, also understanding your own styles and self-reflection. Next, we're going to talk about, so once you have settled in and you start going through your internship, what are some best practices to help you to make sure that you're making the most and getting the most out of this internship? So next slide. So I know that you have all put in a lot of effort so far. You've had to put your resumes together, had to go through interviews. Unfortunately, the work does not stop here, right? So it's really what you put into the experience is what you're going to get out of it. So we've had a separate session yesterday where we were speaking with the managers to help prepare them to receive you in a way that, is just going to set them up for success. So it goes both ways, but you are also going to need to put in some of that effort to make sure that it's a successful experience for you. All right, next slide. So we're going to talk about three things, and I like to call them the ABCs. So A stands for attitude, B stands for behavior, and C is for connections. All right, so let's start with the A, with attitude. So next slide. How many of you have heard of this concept of the fixed mindset and the growth mindset? If you have heard about it, raise your hand. I take your actual real human hands, or you can give me your emoji hands. I take them all. Okay, so several of you are giving me the hand up. All right, wonderful. If you haven't, that's all right. But I'd love to hear from someone maybe who raised your hand about what is let's start with a fixed mindset. What does a fixed mindset mean to you? And if someone would like to speak up, one of you who raised your hand. Yeah, Woolen?
Hi, yes, for let's say that someone has a fixed mindset, they will feel like, oh, I'm good. I was born good at doing something, or I'm bad at doing something, and there's no way to improve. There's no balance between them, and that's the growth mindset. But I don't want to spoil.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. So, I am originally from India, and the stereotype is I should be good at math, right? Spelling bee and math. I'm not good at either one of those, unfortunately, especially math. And so I grew up believing that I was not good at math. And I reinforced that notion that that is not for me. I'm never going to do anything that's analytical. I'm never going to, be in a field that is, has math. So finance, accounting was definitely not going to be my field. By doing that, I was actually limiting myself to other opportunities because maybe there were things that I didn't enjoy, but that didn't define who I was. I knew that if I put in the effort and I pushed myself, I could get it done. It probably wasn't something I'd enjoy a lot, but it doesn't define who I am, right? So definitely that fixed mindset is feeling like you were born with certain skills or abilities or not born with certain skills and abilities, and you define yourself just based on that. You stay in the box, you stay in the bubble, and you're too afraid to try something new. Take a risk, because taking a risk means you're failing. Well, guess what? Biotech is one industry where you need to fail multiple times. This is where science and innovation comes into play. Without having multiple levels of scientific failure, you're never actually going to come to that final outcome. So biotech is based on failure and a growth mindset because you take that failure and you turn it around as a learning opportunity. What did we learn from that past failure or mistake? How can we turn it around and use it to our advantage? So having this growth mindset is extremely important. Okay. Now, do any of you know where this concept of the growth mindset and fixed mindset came from? Anyone know this? All right, I'm going to share with you a really interesting story, and stick with me here. I was a psych major in college, so I'm a psych nerd. I love human behavior. That's why I'm in HR. But this is fascinating. So the lady who came up with this concept of the growth and fixed mindset, her name is Carol Dweck, and she's a professor of psychology at Stanford University. The way she came up with this idea was based on one of her own childhood experiences. So when she was in elementary school, the teacher did an experiment on them, which I find quite horrifying, but this is what happened. So the teacher had each of the students do an IQ test. And then based on the IQ test results, she placed them in the classroom. So the kids with the higher IQ test sat in the front, and the kids with the lower IQ test result sat at the back. And the kids knew this, right? They knew, hey, I'm sitting in the front. I'm a smart kid. I have a high IQ. Those guys, they're the low IQs. They're not smart, the ones sitting behind. Okay, so pretty horrific experiment, right? Now, what do you think happened to the kids who got placed in the back of the classroom? What happened to their behaviors, their attitudes? Any guesses? Yes, Richmie.
I'm guessing from personal experiences, it could have gotten worse if they're placed in the back and not being given attention as what they need, as much as they need.
Yeah, and why do you think their behavior got worse?
Well, in my old school, it was similar. The smarter kids were put in the front, and the quote unquote not smarter kids were put in the back, which resulted in them, for one, not being given as much help because they were further in the back of the class and they were just left to do whatever they wanted. And the teacher really just focused with the students that were in the front. So they were in the same classroom, but not being given the same resources, and which resulted in them, oh, well, I don't care, I just do whatever I want. And it just got worse.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that experience. I didn't know it still happens today. That's pretty scary. And you're absolutely right. So the kids who were at the back, they said, you know what? I'm not so smart. I've got placed at the back. Why bother? Right? So every time the teacher asked a question, they're like, why should I even bother? I know I'm not so smart. So they sat back, they didn't participate, and clearly their grades continued to decline. All right, next question. What do you think happened to the behavior or attitude of the kids sitting in the front of the classroom? Any guesses? Feel free to speak up. Oh, they got cocky. Okay, that's Richmie's guess. Anyone else?
I mean, their confidence probably like skyrocketed. Confidence, I mean, better opportunity.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Improved due to increase in self-esteem. Education and intelligence was reinforced. All right, good guesses. This is what I thought as well. But guess what actually happened? The kids in the front of the room were too afraid to speak up because they said, what if I give the wrong answer? Am I going to be put in the back of the room? So what the teacher had done was she had basically created a fixed mindset for every student, whether they were low IQ or high IQ. And she put them in the box and said, you are only as good as this IQ score. So the kids held on to that position so tightly, they didn't want to mess up. They didn't want to give a wrong answer because of the fear of what if they were not actually as smart. So that is the negative impact of having a fixed mindset. The reason Carol Dweck came up with this was she was one of those smart IQ kids, or high IQ kids. She was placed in the front of the room, and she noticed that her behavior completely changed. She used to be someone who would raise her hand and answer questions. And after this change in seating, she held back. She was too nervous to speak. And that's what got her thinking about what exactly happened and why did my behavior change. All right. So did anyone find this interesting? Any other psych nerds like me? I love that story. So so all that to say, we really want to go in with a growth mindset. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so it's all about changing our perspective. Now, look, it's normal to be nervous when you're at your internship. This is probably not something you've done before. It's a completely new environment. You're probably feeling like, oh gosh, I'm all grown up now. I have to be a certain way. I was extremely nervous, but guess what? That's you being in a growth mindset, right? You're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, and we've all had to do it. Look, everyone who is in a job today, everyone had to start somewhere. So you are not alone in this. So how do you change that narrative? Now, the session before, we talked about understanding yourselves and your behaviors, how you like to communicate. If you are someone who is more in that fixed mindset and you say, I'm scared to mess up, I'm not going to try it, I'm just going to sit back. How about instead speaking up and saying, you know what? I've never done this before, but I'm willing to give it a try. And that's okay. Just knowing that the person is willing to take a risk goes a long way. So rather than holding back out of fear, it's much better to say, I haven't done it, but you know what? I'm going to try it. Right? That's the attitude we want to see. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, if you do something and it doesn't go right, rather than saying, you know what, it's not my fault, my buddy didn't actually show me how to do it, right? That's not taking accountability. Instead, the narrative should be, okay, I didn't get it this time. How could I do it better the next time? What can I do so that I can improve, right? So rather than displacing blame on others. Next slide. Feedback is extremely important. When people or employees come to me and ask me for feedback, it shows me that they care. It shows me that their performance is important to them, right? I appreciate when people ask me for feedback and they're open, and that not only they're asking for feedback, but they can actually take the feedback and then utilize it. So rather than saying, I don't want to be criticized, I don't want to hear anything negative about myself. We're all works in progress. We all mess up at some point. It's much better to find out, find someone who's your trusted partner, your manager, tell them from the beginning, hey, I'm really open to feedback. Please give me feedback. And then solicit that feedback. It shows that you are interested in growing and improving and learning. So instead of saying, no, I'm not going to ask for feedback, I would love your feedback. I really want to learn and grow, right? So make sure that you are asking for regular feedback. Okay, next slide.
Can I insert a little question here
Yes,
about
please.
feedback? Because I think, one scary step is asking for feedback, and it's such a good thing to do. But then the second little step is like, when you do get the feedback, it does cause feelings of like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough, or like, so how do you suggest sort of like incorporating that feedback if it's constructive and kind of telling you like what you did wrong? How do you process that mentally so that you're strong enough to keep asking for feedback?
Great question. Because easier said than done asking for feedback. But when you actually get that raw, honest feedback, especially if it's negative, sometimes it's hard. It's hard to process. And, I'm guilty of this. I've taken it to heart and I've really held on to it. It's impacted my self-esteem or my performance over the next few days. So my advice is don't stop asking for feedback. Get the feedback. Notice if you start having an emotional reaction to the feedback. You may or may not agree with the feedback in the moment. Our tendency as humans is really to, especially if we feel threatened, we're going to push back, right? We're going to get defensive. If you start noticing these emotions start to bubble up, the best thing you can do is show some emotional awareness and say, thank you for the feedback. I need to process it. I'd love to discuss it with you, in our next meeting or in a couple of days. Because over time, all of that information, your emotions will start to temper down. You're going to be able to better cognitively make sense of the feedback. And you may or may not eventually agree with the feedback, but don't react. I always say it's better to respond versus react. Reaction is immediate. If I pinch someone, you're immediately going to say, ow, and you're going to react. It's that automatic. Don't go off of that emotion. Instead, you should respond, meaning, okay, I see the fingers coming to my skin. I feel the skin being pinched. I'm feeling the sensation of pain. Now I'm going to say, ow. Obviously, a very unrealistic scenario, right? But that is showing awareness. So reacting is quick, and some might be something that you regret later. That's reacting. Responding is making sure that you have not let your emotions take over. You are sitting with your thoughts and your emotions, letting your cognitive brain process the information and then be able to respond appropriately. Okay, so best advice is if you start feeling anxious, nervous, defensive, say thank you for the feedback. Always thank them for the feedback because it's hard to give feedback. Sometimes it can be really hard, but they have taken a risk and they have made the effort to give you feedback. So always thank them for the feedback and say, I would really like to think about this. Can we please discuss it at the next meeting? Does that help, Lila?
Yes, and there's another question. When is the best time to ask for feedback? Should we ask for feedback several times, for example, every 2 weeks during the internship?
I would set up the expectation in your very first meeting with your manager to say, hey, I'm someone who I want to make the most out of my internship. I would love your ongoing feedback. So set that expectation up from the beginning. Managers may or may not remember to give you feedback. So maybe you can even say, would it be okay if at our regular check-ins, I asked for feedback? Or you can say, maybe you have certain projects or milestones that are going to be periodic. Maybe at the end of that, so it really depends on how much feedback you want and whether it's appropriate. If you ask for it every week, they're going to say, well, not much has changed since last week, right? There has to be a little bit of either time or some progress that they should be able to give you feedback on. One really good way to ask for feedback can be saying, what is one thing that you think I have done well since we last spoke? And what's one thing you think I could be doing better? Sometimes if you just say, hey, I want feedback, people struggle because there might be a lot of information. But if you ask them for one thing that you have done well and one thing you can improve upon, it helps them to narrow down their focus. So even how you ask for feedback can be important.
That's super helpful. Thanks, Anushka.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay. Again, that fixed mindset, growth mindset. This is how I learned it in school. This is how we were taught to do experiments, right? Okay, sure, but maybe this company is trying something different or doing something different. So not being resistant, but asking, okay, how do you think I should tackle this, right? What ideas do you have? Let's go to the next slide. Okay. This is another one. And we talked about the imposter syndrome, right? Feeling like, oh, I'm just an intern. I'm not good enough. Why am I here? My ideas don't count. Absolutely not. Your ideas matter because guess what? People who have been working in the industry, you see the same thing over and over again. And there can be groupthink. You are bringing a fresh perspective, a fresh set of ideas. So don't be afraid to raise your hand and say, you know what, I'd like to offer some suggestions. This may not be a great idea, but I'd like to say it anyways, right? Don't be afraid because guess what? Maybe you have the most brilliant suggestion and it's going to be helpful. And if it's not, it's just an opinion. But the attitude of you wanting to contribute goes a really long way. Okay, so don't hold back. All right, next one. Next slide. I need help with this problem. So many times as an HR professional, I'll have people come up to me and say, oh, I need help. What I would much rather have is them coming to me and saying, hey, I have already done XYZ. Here are the solutions I've come up with already. How do you think I should proceed next? Don't just come to me with the questions and expect me to do all the work. Show me that you have put in some time and thought and effort into it. And, and then you're asking for their guidance or support. So not just, I need help. Say, here's what I've already done. I'm still not getting what I need to. Can you please help me? Shows you being proactive and, trying first.
Anushka, what if you have a sense that your solutions, because you're new to the company, new to the role, your solutions probably aren't really correct, or applicable, should you still kind of throw a few solutions out there to show that you've been thinking about it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, you know, again, I think I don't think there is ever any bad idea. You never know unless you've vocalized it, whether it's good or bad. But if you feel like you're going down a wrong path, maybe that's a great opportunity to ask your manager, or if you're paired up with a buddy, to say, hey, I made that comment. What did you think? You know, is this relevant? If not, then how can I think differently next time? So you can also get feedback, but I wouldn't let fear hold you back. Be bold, be brave. You know, I'd much rather see the enthusiasm than someone who's just, you know, a wallflower.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's a really great comment that Helen has made in the chat. I've heard a lot of people tell me that people don't like to be outdone by interns and are not hired back when they share good suggestions, or actively think they're arrogant for suggesting things without the experience in understanding the big picture. How does that play into offering suggestions? Great question. It's how you deliver the message. Now, again, knowing yourself and knowing your style and the words that you choose matter. You're not just trying to throw out a suggestion for the sake of having your voice heard. It's not you being brash and saying, hey, listen to my idea. It's you saying, this is how I would think, can I please share it? And this may or may not be relevant, but if it's okay, I'd like to share it, right? So being professional, being polite, being respectful, yet being vocal. I think it's a fine balance. It's in the delivery of how you are presenting yourself. Yeah. Okay, let's keep moving. So we talked about the attitude and the growth mindset. Let's go on to the next behavior. So I would like to hear from you. What does professionalism mean to you? Because this is a loaded word, and professionalism can mean different things to different people. So if you can please put in the chat, what does professionalism mean to you? 1 or 2 words. Staying on task. Okay. Respect and maturity, being respectful, behaving a certain way, presentable and attentive. There's a time and place, honest, reliable, acting appropriately, showing up, communication, being timely. Absolutely. Communication and initiative. These are all wonderful examples of professionalism. Okay. Let's move to the next, acquiring the characteristics that your career or job require from you. Okay, the next one is a video, but maybe in the interest of time, we'll skip over the video. So let's just keep going. Okay, so in terms of behavior, you want to show that you take the role seriously, that this is not just something that the school made you do, or just something because you have nothing better to do with your summer. This matters to you. And if it matters to you, it's going to matter to the people around you. Okay, so make sure you're taking it seriously. Understanding company expectations and procedures. We talked about that from an onboarding perspective. And if you're not sure, ask. Dress, timeliness, and preparation. So we talked about the dress code, being on time, not just for your first day, but showing up at the right times, being prepared for meetings, being on time at meetings. All of these things really matter. So if the meeting starts at 10 a.m., be there, 2 minutes before to show that you are ready and you're prepared and ready to go. Okay? If for any reason you're going to be absent or late, make sure that you notify your supervisor as soon as possible. I was working with a company where we had an intern, not through Project Onramp, but we had an intern who literally ghosted us for 4 days. We had no idea where the person was. We tried to contact them. Turns out they'd gone on a camping trip, had briefly mentioned it to someone, but we had no idea and there was no way of contacting them, right? That's just not acceptable. And sometimes it's an illness, you wake up feeling sick. Sure, that happens to all of us. make sure that you have sent a text, sent an email, left a voicemail. Make sure they have received that message. And this is another thing to ask your managers is what's the best way of communicating with you? If there is an emergency, do you check your text messages? Not everyone does, right? So making sure you know how to contact them and notifying them as soon as possible. Minding your manners. There is a fine line between being casual and sociable and being professional, right? You're going to get a sense of it when you are there. But there will also be times when there might be happy hours after, summer barbecues. There'll be other outside of work events, which I highly recommend you go to. But remember that you're being evaluated at all times. So just because you are at an after work setting doesn't mean you let loose and, be unprofessional, say things that might be, rude or disrespectful. You are being evaluated at every time. So mind your manners with everyone. Sometimes when I have people coming in for interviews, I actually ask the receptionist to give me feedback on how the candidate was with the receptionist, right? When you show up in an interview, you're very professional. How are they when people are not looking? And I've had the receptionists tell me they were really rude when they walked in. I take that into account. So you want to be minding your manners, whether or not people are watching you. Be adventurous, try new things. There might be things outside your comfort zone, a new project. Raise your hand if you have the bandwidth, right? If you're interested, be adventurous. Leave a lasting impression. I have had interns in the past who were rock stars. And we said, we must get this person back. Remember this person? Oh my goodness, fantastic. Not just in the work they did, but also a good cultural fit. Companies are looking for that integration in your behaviors, your personality, just being part of that overall fabric of the culture. So you would really want to set yourself apart. Okay, next slide. Some communication do's and don'ts. Understand what acceptable forms of communication are. Some companies use Slack, some companies use Teams, IM. Not everyone is as familiar or comfortable with all these tools. So find out what's the best way of communicating regular project updates versus more urgent, time-sensitive messages. Cell phone etiquette, really important. I know we're all connected to our devices, but make sure they're on silent. If you are expecting an important call, let the person in the meeting know, hey, I'm expecting a call from my doctor. I might need to take this, right? So be careful of that. When you're emailing, be very careful of the reply alls. I've hit reply all and it just maybe was not the best idea. So be careful, use professional language. Anything that's sensitive information is better done in person versus, putting down in an email. So know when to have a face-to-face versus putting it in an email. There are certain hot button topics that you should just not engage with in a work setting. This includes things like politics or religion, right? Yes, free speech, we're all entitled to our opinions, but the workplace is really not a place where you want to bring that up. Okay, so I know with the elections coming up, whatever it is, keep those comments to yourself, even if other people are engaging in those topics. And lastly, do not share any company-related information on social media. Many companies have their own social media policies. A lot of times they have to be vetted through someone in the company who manages their PR and communications. It's okay to say, hey, I'm working at this company. It's okay to repost what the company may have posted, but please don't, on behalf of the company, initiate or share any information regarding the company. All right. I'm running a little behind, but if it's okay, Lila, I'll keep pushing through.
Yeah, sure. We can go through this.
Okay, so the third part is the C's. So we talked about attitudes. We talked about the attitudes, the behaviors, and now the connections. So we talked about previously, when you first join the company, it's important to go have those meetings, get to meet people. But even beyond that, one of the best things you can do for yourself is get to meet people. This is a unique opportunity for you to be connected to all these people in the industry. So let's move to the next slide. So informational interviews. Again, do not be shy. Informational interviews are when you go up to someone and say, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time, or can we get lunch together or go for coffee? I'd love to learn more about your journey. I'd love to pick your brain. I'm trying to make the most of my internship, so I'd love to connect with you, right? So let's move to the next slide. Okay, so what are some questions, if you can put in the chat very quickly, what are some questions that you can ask during an informational interview? What are some opening questions or things that you might want to learn about from an informational interview? Put them in the chat, please. What do you love about the industry? Company culture, for sure. What's something you wish you knew when going into the industry or your company or the role? How did you feel when you first joined? What led you to the industry? What's the favorite part of their role? Asking about their educational background. What department do you work in? How do you like it? Tell me about your career journey. What types of jobs have you had before? All wonderful, wonderful questions. Is there anything you think that could use improvement? Absolutely. What are their goals moving forward? There are so many questions that you can ask, right? So go in prepared, have a few questions that you have prepared for yourself, and have a 30 to 60-minute conversation. What inspires you? Long and short-term goals. Absolutely. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here are some examples for you. What experiences led you to your current job? What is a typical day like for you? What aspects do you find most interesting or challenging? What background or experiences does someone need to have in order to get into this type of work or industry? How do you see this industry or the skills needed changing in the future? A lot of companies are starting to think about AI and job automation. There's this new term I learned about, which was FOBO, which is fear of becoming obsolete. That's a new thing in HR that, we're starting to think about AI and the future. So that's a great future forward thinking question. How do you see the industry evolving? And then ask them, who else can I talk to learn more about the career path, right? There might be people you have picked, but maybe they recommend other people within the company or even outside of the company, within their own networks. That might be really helpful for you to connect with. So don't be shy. Through your own self-assessment, you may have discovered that you're someone who's more introverted, who needs time to process and analyze. That's completely okay. There are times you're going to have to push yourself outside the comfort zone. I hate networking events. I find it just uncomfortable, makes me want to crawl out of my skin. But I know that there is value in doing it. So I prepare myself and I go and I put myself in the situation. And that's fine. I do it for that time and then I come out of it. But I know that that time is very well spent. So just because your natural inclination isn't to reach out or ask for informational interviews, growth mindset, push yourself out of your comfort zone. It's going to help you in the long run. All right, next slide. And then some best practices. Always send a thank you, a genuine, authentic thank you note to whoever you have spoken with. That could be after your conversation with them. Definitely at the end of your internship, you want to send a thank you to your manager or to the team. Leave that good lasting impression. LinkedIn is the best form of networking in a professional environment. So ask, is it okay if I connect with you on LinkedIn? Build your professional network through LinkedIn. Ask for recommendations. This can be LinkedIn recommendations or actual letters of recommendation that you can use for future jobs. Ask for it in a timely way. Ask for it before you're done with the internship, so all the work that you have done is fresh in their mind. great way to kind of get that values, get something tangible. And then keep in touch with your coworkers and supervisors. Just because you're done doesn't mean that you have to stop communicating with them. If there's a project that you have wrapped up, but someone else is taking it forward, maybe check in and say, how's that project going, right? So it's not a one and done. This is a great time and a great opportunity for you to seize the experiences and your connections and really use them to your advantage going forward. And I think that's everything.
Thanks, yeah. Yep. Thank you so much. I think, since we had so much engagement during the session, we'll just sort of move on to the next slide, please, Tiffany. I'd love to invite Khan to talk about the NACE career competencies. And before he does, I just want to mention that this is just a framework for thinking about yourself as a professional and about your growth. And at the end of the summer, we're kind of going to be asking you about your growth in relation to these competencies. So we just wanted Khan to come on and just touch on these for a few minutes. So thank you so much for agreeing to be here, Khan. It's all yours.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. So this is just going to be an introduction to some of the NACE career competencies. So I'm just going to read them out. And then while I read them out, I just want you to think, or you can write in the chat if you want. Just think about what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear these words. So the competencies are communication, teamwork, leadership, technology, professionalism, career and self-development, critical thinking, and equity and inclusion. So together, these 8 skills are considered what we call the 8 key skills to being hired. So we've learned through research that when employers are looking to hire recent graduates, they're not just looking for like a certain major or GPA, and typically they look for certain soft skills, especially during an interview or the first time they meet you. Sometimes it's also called power skills, if you don't want to use the word soft skills, that you've developed outside of the classroom. So in 2016, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE, surveyed employers to find out what skills they look for when hiring recent graduates, and developed this list of 8 key skills that the majority of employers seek. So if you see that chart on the right, it's just a few key statistics from that study, showing kind of what like how much employers weigh or value each one. And as you can see, all of these are pretty important. So, I want you to think about like why and how are these transferable skills, right? Why might it be important to have transferable skills in today's job market and age of technology? Whether you are a biology, psychology, or economics major, whatever major you are, these are all skills that are likely to be relevant in almost any job. A few cool like statistics: about 15 years ago, it was common for adults to keep one job over the whole course of their 30-year plus career. But based on current market trends, researchers predict that people in your generation will likely have over 10 different jobs between college graduation and retirement. So it's good to kind of keep in context how these 8 competencies are transferable over from one job to the next. I also want you to think about why it's helpful to learn about these skills and what you can do to develop them now. It's helpful to be aware of what will make you marketable in the workplace and to reflect on ways you already demonstrate these skills and articulate them in resumes, cover letters, interviews, and proactively set goals to develop even further. Start to reflect on ways that you've demonstrated these skills and strategically set goals or seek opportunities to practice these areas. So like Tiffany mentioned earlier, right, at the end of the summer, you're going to be kind of reflecting on your internships. And I want you to keep in mind these career competencies so that you can take what you've learned in your current internship or the internship that you're going to do this summer to kind of leverage that experience to using these skills, leverage that experience so that you can get another internship, get a work study, get a research opportunity, and then ultimately use these to leverage into the workforce after you graduate. So yeah, that's just a
Thank you.
brief introduction.
Yeah, that was really wonderful. Thank you so much, Khan. You've given us a lot of things to think about, and students, you'll be getting sort of more of a description of what each of these things is so that you can, by email, so you can kind of really keep that in mind as you're going through your internship. Thanks. And just on to the next unit, please, Tiffany.
And our next session is going to be presented by Sherry Jacobson from the Halloran Consulting Group and Nick Schweg from Collegium Pharmaceuticals. And Nick and Sherry will provide you with some tips around professional communication, how to best navigate difficult conversations, and what email etiquette looks like, whether that's with your managers or with your colleagues. So Sherry and Nick, whenever you're ready, please feel free to take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Tiffany, and welcome to all of you. I'm sure you're all really excited to get going in your internships or continue in your internships. So I'm hoping that Nick and I can give you a few tips and tricks on how to approach some of those maybe challenging conversations. As Tiffany said, I'm Sherry Jacobson. I'm with Halloran Consulting Group, and my career path, if you ever want to catch up on LinkedIn, has been much like that squiggly line. Nick, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nick. I'm here, the head of talent acquisition at Collegium, and so happy to be here chatting with all of you. I agree, that squiggly line made me smile. I started my career in child protection social work, which many of you may not know has nothing to do with recruiting. And so we go on our journey, but so thanks. Glad to have you here.
All right, so we know that sometimes you're going to find yourself in situations that you maybe didn't anticipate or might be kind of conflictual or challenging. And we want to give you some tips and tricks on some of the best ways to approach those situations. And we're going to start off with a little bit of a role play. So, for example, you may be assigned a task or project where you need more background or more information to be able to do what you're being asked to do. So, for example, Nick, I'd like you to go through the employees' IDPs and look for trends so the head of L&D can come up with this year's training plan.
I don't understand any of that.
What part didn't make sense?
None of it?
You're basically going through these documents and looking for things that come up multiple times and put them in a list from most common to least.
Okay, I'm on it.
So, how do you guys think that went? You think that Nick got what he needed to do the best work that he possibly could? You can shout out or put it in the chat. Resounding no's, I'm saying.
Lots of confusion out there, Sherry, because I think they also don't understand what you were assigning me.
True, true, true. So what we've got on the slide here is just some an approach that you can use when you have a difficult situation and you need to communicate with someone. And the initial part is really that shared focus. Emphasize that you're both after the same thing. You both want to have success in whatever project you're working on. And so that first step is, I really want to do the best job so that you can have what you need for this project. And then you say the concern, but I don't understand what's happening. You can identify the impact, what might happen as a result. Sometimes that's helpful when you have a kind of a conflictual situation. And then that active listening phase, right? You pause and you listen for the person to respond so that you can understand where they're coming from. That kind of ties into that earlier conversation about different communication styles and how you can pick up on the cues of how they like to be communicated to. And then, of course, identify what action. Anything you want to add to that, Nick?
No, I think that's a great overview. And the reality is these steps can be applied in a myriad of different ways, right? And so we're going to go back to that same conversation we had and see if Nick can handle that a little bit better this time around. But know that the concepts are translatable across a huge variety of situations that we'll give you a broad brush strokes in terms of some of those, but yeah, that's the only thing I'd add.
All right, so let's try this again. Nick, I'd like you to go through employees' IDPs to look for trends so the head of L&D can build out this year's training plans.
Okay, I'm happy to help. Can I ask a few questions first?
Absolutely.
Great. I am really excited about supporting this project, and I know we both want it to be successful. Can I get some clarity around some of the specifics, though?
Yes. What do
You
you need?
used a few acronyms that I'm not familiar. For example, what does IDP stand for?
Oh, that stands for Individual Development Plan.
Oh, okay. And what exactly is an individual development plan?
Each year, following employees' performance reviews, they will build an individual development plan, or IDP, to focus on learning and improving in areas they want or need to improve. This might include conferences, reading books, attending classes, taking on new projects that expose them to the areas of development that they're interested in, things like that.
Oh, interesting. So when you say look for trends, what kind of trends might I be looking for?
Well, you might see, for example, a lot of employees want to improve their presentation skills or their verbal or written communication skills, or possibly you'll see employees wanting to learn more, like, for example, project management.
Ah, so this makes sense. So if enough employees want to learn about something, then will we offer a training?
Yes, exactly.
And what does L&D stand for?
That stands for learning and development. The head of learning and development is responsible for building and executing the company training plans for the year.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. Would it be okay if I reach back out if I had any questions along the way?
Of course, please do. So as you can see, this conversation went a little bit differently. How do folks feel about how Nick can approach this project now? Do you think he's got what he needs to move forward? We got a lot of yes, more clear, but maybe too wordy.
I'm known for being too wordy, Helen. Us recruiters in this world are quite verbose.
But it is important that Nick asks those clarifying questions so that those expectations can be set and he can really be successful in what he's doing, right? If he went off with the first scenario and started executing, he may have made some mistakes, and then that could have set that internship on a spiral in the wrong direction, right? So we want to make sure that we're setting those expectations and getting that clarity up front so that everyone can be as successful as they can be.
And I'd just add that I'll also get significantly more learning opportunity the second conversation, having a better understanding in terms of the breadth of work that I'm doing and its impact on the organization, all the employees that work at the company, rather than simply being assigned a task and executing it, right? So part of these internships, yes, are to give you some experience executing on some tasks, but it's also really important that you get that foundational, that theoretical knowledge as well. Companies do not create internships if they don't want people asking questions. And so don't feel badly about asking those questions about that foundational understanding so that not only can you execute the task well, but you can really understand the impact your work is going to have.
And maybe even make some more of those suggestions, right, to improve the process.
Exactly.
All right, let's go to the next slide. And this is really just kind of a quick overview of some of those situations where you may need to leverage these principles of effective communication. So we talked about not understanding the work, Maybe you feel uncomfortable with your supervisor's management style. You need a more structured work plan and next steps. You need more feedback. We've talked a lot about some of these things already today. Or maybe you feel overwhelmed with the volume of work and need to kind of get some guidance on how to break that out. More background and context. You want to network more. Like, these are all situations where you might need to leverage some of those communication principles, and probably also leverage some of the ABCs that we learned about, as well as kind of the different styles of how you approach things. So we provided some examples here, but I'd love to hear from all of you. Are there other have you encountered, for those of you who have started, have you encountered these situations already? Or are there other situations that you've encountered that were a little bit challenging?
And while you're all typing, I'll teach you a pro tip that although the focus of our presentation is situations you might experience in internships, you can use these tools in your personal life too. And so I do all the time. I have my sister who will roll her eyes when she can tell I'm pulling out my HR toolbox. But my sister's a lot more than me even. And so I need these tools.
All right. Doesn't look like we are getting anybody who's encountered either these situations.
I wanted to kind of ask something, Sherry. This is Lila. Like, I feel like some of these, our previous presenters have given tools and tips to the students to address, but I want to call out one situation. You feel uncomfortable with your supervisor's management style. That's something I hope students are not going to encounter, but can you talk a little bit more about that if they do, and just ways they can navigate that? Because that seems a little more loaded or scary.
Completely agree. Because different sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, but different managers have different styles. And this kind of ties back to kind of first understanding what their style is, and that self-reflection of what your style is. So you're kind of approaching it from a point of understanding. Nick, I didn't want to talk over you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we all kind of spent some time on that compass assessment. I've done a slightly different version, the insights. And one of the things that assessment teaches you is about yourself, but also those areas where you might have conflict with others, very similar to the insights program I've been in. And so one of the first things I do, I have been in this situation more times than I care to admit, is really go back to understanding myself, my style, and then try to figure out my leader and where might my leader be in this map of things, and try to find that common ground, and try to base those off of, or the conversation, the communication off of those areas. And just to understand that we are all different people with different styles. And so I think having awareness of that and using a tool like Compass is a great way to do that. So your leader won't necessarily have gone through Compass, but your experience will probably be able to place your leader, peers, right on that sort of northwest, east, south map throughout your career.
And it is amazing how well you can leverage those tools. Because I have an example too. It was, I had working in Big Pharma, I had a new VP, and we were like oil and water. We were just knocking heads, and I couldn't figure it out. But then I did some introspection and was able to recognize in my manager that she was very north. She was like, give it to me. I want to know it now. And I was more the visionary. Well, and so when I realized that I just needed to turn my vision into some action for her, we're best friends. I mean, we can continue. I've long left that company, but we continue to remain connected, and we've had an amazing work relationship ever since. So yeah, it really does work. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? We can go to the next slide. So this is just a little bit on email etiquette and kind of spinning off some of the C communications. that we heard just recently. With email, right? A lot of conversation takes place via email in the work environment. And this can also really apply to if you're using direct messaging tools such as Slack or Teams. To really, it's different than how you're using that in a social context. So you really want to make sure you're succinct and that your message is clear and not filled with a lot of kind of fluff to be able to get that message across. Using full sentences, avoid any shorthands like LOL, TTYL, etc. Make sure you're beginning with an intro and ending with a salutation. Avoid sending emails outside of work hours. Remember, with most email functionalities, you can schedule an email to be sent at a future date and time. And I think this one's really important. If you're feeling emotional, pause before you send that email. Sometimes in a work environment, you can, something is sent and maybe you're interpreting it the wrong way, or maybe it was intended to be a flame mail, right? But you need to take that step back because you want to be the professional one in the relationship. So you need to pause before sending. And this is kind of my pet peeve. If an email string has gone back and forth more than twice, without a resolution, let's get people together and talk, right? Because sometimes things just don't get the right context via email. And if it's going back and back and back, you're not going to get a resolution until you pull people in a room together. Nick, anything else you want to add?
Maybe not add, going back to that, if you're feeling emotional, because I think this is a really important tool that I've used to propel my career. All of our life experiences have caused us to have some hot buttons. And the reality is, when you're working across an organization with a lot of different people, some are going to hit those hot buttons. And early in my career, those would hit, and I would fire off the most nasty, angry, emotional email anyone could ever generate. And what I learned over time is I didn't achieve anything at all in so doing, right? My goal is to get work done, to find the common ground, to address whatever problem it is. And so I've taken this to heart. I shut the computer, I walk away, and I do not go back to that email for 24 hours. Often I will think about that email outside of work, but by the time I go back, I'm actually able to craft something that will get the job done, whatever that desired result is. So I think that one for me really spoke to me. It's a big pet sort of challenge that I faced throughout my career, just having some, challenging experiences. I've got a couple of hot buttons.
It's interesting you say that, Nick, because over the years we've had, in the 5 cities, hundreds of Project Onramp interns now. And if there's one area that every company points out is an area of potential growth for their student or potential improvement, it is emails. And so it's not pointing the finger at any one student. You're all undergraduates. You haven't written these types of emails. So it'll be a little bit more challenging. So take time to read it several times, make sure there are no typos, just those basics. Make sure you're greeting the person properly, make sure you're signing off on the email properly. Just spend a little time, Google professional emails. I did that early on in my career just to get ideas on the tone of your email. So this is an area that all of our students in past years have really had to work on. And so I'm assuming all of you will too. So just really take it pretty seriously.
Thank you. All right. I think that's all that we have for you today. But please, I just want to wish you all the best of luck in your internships. And you guys are rock stars, so keep rocking on.
And I'll drop my LinkedIn in the chat so that if anybody does want a LinkedIn and has follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I field questions from our employees, from random candidates. I'm happy to help you along the way. That goes for today. Maybe 3-4 years from now, you're negotiating an offer or trying to figure out what direction to go. don't hesitate to reach out, and good luck to all of you.
Thanks, Sherry and Nick, for sharing some valuable strategies on how to navigate potential workplace scenarios and how to communicate professionally across teams. Interns, I hope, learned a lot from your session, and hopefully they will take on some of the tips that you provided them today. Our next session is goal setting, which will be presented by Kayla from the Howland Consulting Group, and Kayla will talk about some best practices as well as why it's important to have goals, and how goals will help you stay on track to meeting deadlines on time.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. I know we're coming up on time, so I'll work to get through this, but my name's Kayla. I'm the Senior HR Manager at Halloran Consulting Group, same company that Sherry and Michelle are from, so small life science consulting firm in Boston. But I'm excited to focus on goal setting today. A large part of my day-to-day job is partnering with employees and managers to support their career development goals and overall journey from onboarding to offboarding. So I think goals are very relevant, especially as this team embarks on their internship journey. As I'm going through this session, I'd encourage everyone to start thinking, what is the purpose of your summer internship? What do you want to achieve by the end of the program? And maybe that's too far out. So even just starting at what key takeaways can I take from this session to set myself up for success in this internship? That's a good starting point as well. We can go to the next slide. Okay, perfect. We're on the right slide. So let's start with the basics. So what is a goal? A goal is a desired outcome or target that a person, group, or organization aims to achieve within a specific time frame. It serves as a guiding purpose that directs efforts, actions, and resources to a particular end. Goals provide clarity and focus, helping to prioritize activities and measure progress. So it's important to note that goals can really be applied in many different scenarios. They can be applied in a short-term or long-term capacity. Short-term maybe being 3 months to a year, so very relevant in the internship capacity, or they can be long-term. So maybe it's 3 to 5 years. But again, it's not prescriptive, just kind of understanding whether your goal is around the short-term or long-term time frame. And goals can be applied across all areas of life. So in this capacity, we're really talking about internships, but they can be applied for personal goals like wellness, education, hobbies, or maybe it's organizational or team goals. But the reason we like to focus on them is because it really helps us set direction and focus and set a clear path forward. So we can go to the next slide and I'll go through a few best practices that you can apply right away. And I had sent a SMART goal worksheet to my colleague, Sherry. I don't know if she's able to drop it in the chat, but if she does, feel free to follow along. It's a fillable PDF for the SMART goal format. But when we talk about SMART goals, they're structured ways to set and achieve objectives. So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. Noting this is especially effective for those short-term goals, which makes it, again, very applicable to the summer internship program. Why is that? SMART goals are particularly well suited for the short term because they provide really clear, actionable, and measurable steps within a defined time frame. So let's start with S, specific. This really means defining clear objectives. So clearly articulating what you want to achieve, avoiding vague or broad goals. How can you do this? Use precise language. So really specifying the who, what, where, when, why of your goal. So an example, instead of just saying, I want to get in shape, making a bit more specific. So I want to be able to run 1 mile without walking. Why? To achieve my goal of improving cardiovascular fitness. When? I want to achieve this by end of summer. Where? By training at the track 3 times a week. So really outlining it more than just that vague and broad goal and diving into the specifics. As we go into M, measurable, it's really quantifying that goal. So including concrete criteria for tracking progress and measuring success and setting milestones. So break it down, identify smaller interim milestones that will really help you gauge your progress on how you're tracking towards the goal. I'm just going to keep going on this running example. I'm a big runner, so I'll keep running with it. But in the measurable instance, maybe it's I'll track my runs using the Strava app, giving you something to really analyze that progress on a week-by-week basis. Achievable, be realistic. So ensure the goal is attainable within your current resources, skills, time frame, and identify any obstacles. So recognize any potential barriers and plan on how you can overcome them. Maybe in this scenario where you're training for running a mile without walking, it's wintertime and it's going to be very icy. So kind of planning around that to make sure that you can really achieve it without any of those barriers. Relevant are aligned with broader objectives. So make sure your goal is meaningful and relevant to your long-term objectives. So really ensuring significance, the goal should matter to you and align with your values. And finally, time bound, just really honing in on setting a deadline. So define a clear time frame for achieving the goal and establishing checkpoints. So include specific dates for those interim milestones. And I know we're coming up on time, but a few just helpful tips that I've found to be beneficial when I'm setting my goals is writing them down, documenting them, reviewing them regularly, monitoring that progress and adjusting. Having that incorporated flexibility really helps us as we kind of encounter different obstacles and really being able to flex with those goals as they come in and we gain new insights or are adapting to changing circumstances. Staying accountable. So maybe you have an accountability buddy, a trusted friend, mentor, or coach that you can check in with just to hold you accountable and discuss progress or challenges that you're experiencing. Reviewing and reflecting. Again, goals are set to change based on circumstances. So periodically checking back in to make sure you're on track with your goal and assessing your progress. And finally, celebrate those achievements. I think we can get so deep into the weeds on what we're doing with the goal that we forget to celebrate those small achievements along the way. So celebrate the milestones and maybe you can do so with that accountability buddy. With that, I will pass it back over to the Project Onramp team to close it out.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kayla, and students. This was, it just was a lot of information coming at you. And I hope that it is going to be useful, that you did take some notes. And I just want to wrap up first, we also want to do a screenshot, so don't jump off the Zoom. But I want to wrap up by saying, this summer, we want you to feel supported. You're gonna have a lot of triumphs, but you might come across challenging situations where you want to ask for help. Tiffany and Thassine will be your first line of defense. You can email them about any questions, anything that you need, anything that you want help with. I'm there as well. You have our email addresses. You should be connecting with all of us on LinkedIn, all of the professionals during the summer sessions. See if you can connect with them in some way. We're just really excited for you to have a great summer. Thank you so much to our speakers for showing up and sharing your insights. We really, as an Onramp team, we depend on all of you who actually work in this industry to help to guide our students as they enter and to give them a feeling of belonging. Like that's what we all want, right? We all want to feel like we're in spaces where we belong, we can deploy our skills and do a good job. And be recognized for it. So I wish everyone an incredible summer. And I do want to take a photo. And so if people can turn their cameras on so that we don't have any unfilled squares. Tiffany or Thacine, would you guys one of you go ahead and do a screenshot?
Yes, Helen, can you turn on your screen? You're the only box that's missing a face. One sec. We have multiple pages. One second. Okay.
While we are doing the photos, I also want to tell all of you that Project Onramp is a program that's going to get better with your feedback, with student feedback. So over the summer, feel free to also email us to tell us what we could add to this program, what we could do differently, what we can do better. Do you want to have social events? Do you want to have information about specific topics, like maybe grad school, whether you should consider grad school, or, I mean, I'm just pulling that, out of thin air, but just any ways that you feel, because there are going to be many students coming after you. So any ways that you feel we can do better or we can add to enhance this program, we really want to hear from you this summer. And now I will just throw it to Tiffany and Thacine to wrap up.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you all. It was great getting to meet you and put a face to your resumes. And I really wish you the best of luck, but don't hesitate to reach out to Thacine and I. I feel like we're pretty young enough to still understand what you might be going through.
Yeah, and again, thank you all for joining our boot camp, and we're looking forward to seeing you in our summer sessions.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.